Welcome to Canada's podcast. Hi there, I'm Phil Bliss, and welcome to Canada's podcast, coming to you today from Toronto. Today we're going to meet Nadia Marwa, who is an Indian-Canadian photographer, film production professional, and founder of the Photo Poets Society, a mindful wedding photography company. She began her career in Mumbai, India, before relocating to Toronto. She left her hometown at the age of 19 to pursue an education in communication design at the MIT Institute of Design and completed a postgraduate program in film production at the Vancouver Film School. Her profound experience of deep meditation shifted her perspective on life. She is now a mindful visual creator, specializing in photography and film, and alongside that, wedding and occasion photography. She's collaborated with musicians, film professionals, including three-time Juno-nominated musician Alysha Brilla and Canadian actor, director, and musician Steven McCarthy. Additionally, she's worked with businesses and not-for-profit organizations such as Compost Digital Ventures and South by Southwest in Austin. So Nadia, welcome to Canada's podcast. Great to have you on the podcast. I'm looking forward to this story, if you like. But before we get too deep into the conversation, tell us a bit about yourself, what you do and how you got here, basically.
Thanks, Philip, for having me. I felt like when I saw you the other day and you said it's open for all entrepreneurs, I was like, this is too good to be true. I think I really appreciate you taking that, opening that up for a lot of entrepreneurs. Absolutely. So it's such a long story, but I'll definitely try to see and briefen it up. My entrepreneurial journey, I think, started in Canada, but I was working as a photographer for a very long time back in India as well. Mm-hmm. And the reason I got into photography, I studied my undergrad was in a design college in Pune, India. Mm-hmm. And I was studying graphic design, and I didn't enjoy, I love looking at good graphic design, but I just didn't enjoy sitting on a laptop and creating. That just wasn't working for me. And in the middle, we had a photography class, which was just a 1 week class. And I think just having the tool, I bought a small, my first camera was a very small Canon camera. Mm-hmm. I bought a small camera, and we had this assignment. We had to do 10 photos of textures and 10 photos of, just a very basic beginning into the thing. And just taking it out, and I think it's almost a tool that helps you explore a world further than what you see, because it really makes you focus onto something that you probably would have missed if you were just walking past by. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, that was a very, I'm generally an introspective person, so I feel for me, that just actually lightened my soul. It helped me see light better. It helped me see people better. It helped me see textures better. And I felt I started looking at the world again with this fresh pair of eyes. And that was just my attachment. That's how it actually began for me, to just hold the camera. And I would just go on long walks by myself early in the morning. And I would just shoot, I would just look for things that fit in that world where something was happening. And it's so interesting because every time you take the camera out, it feels oh, this is a great photograph. And then you come back and you're no, but this wasn't necessarily. And something else that you shot very by intuitive thing that you didn't think was that great has something very special in it that you find out later. So I think it's just almost like a journey for self-discovery. So my camera, the relationship between me and the camera was the first place I knew this is something I want to do further, and I want to hold on to further. And during that time, that's how I found the camera, and then the camera found me. But there was a guy in India. His name is Joseph Radhik, and he was the I think one of the first few people who brought like a new twist to wedding photography. And he had like a full-on corporate job at some, I believe it was Colgate, but and then he just completely left his job, started his company, and basically had like a few photographers under him, and really brought like meaning and narrative to weddings, which didn't exist before in India at all. I think maybe in the West it was there, but he was the first person to really like open up that world in India. And now he's doing like really, really big projects. Like he's shooting all the big celebrity weddings and Priyanka Chopra, Nick Jonas, and even like bigger projects than that. So I started my first internship with him in India, in Bombay. And also, like I felt like I was also very extroverted when I was younger, especially. I feel like I was very extroverted when I was younger. And just to be around so many people and also like do what I love, like, and also like almost like it's like an internal relationship with the camera and an external relationship with people. And it's like that dance that you kind of like do when you're photographing people. And for me, I felt like, so I work as a wedding photographer. And I feel like weddings is almost like a film stage set, and you kind of like go into it and out of it, and you kind of tell the story into the pieces. And I feel like the story lies not on what we mostly see on the outside of a wedding, like how we see it a wedding, but in the inside of that family. Like every family is so different. Every like couple is so different. Like the story between every person is so different, and I feel like that's where the narrative really lies. So yeah.
Stay ahead of the game with our expert tips and strategies that will help your business thrive in a digital era. CanadasPodcast.com. Subscribe now.
Well, I have to. Your company's called, the Photo Poets Society. I think obviously Dead Poets Society comes to mind. So I think it's an interesting thing. But you do business in Vancouver and Toronto and India. I think some people would be very interested to know how you manage that. It's not like you're a big multinational corporation. How do you manage doing? Never mind, one continent on opposite sides, but another continent that's not exactly a small continent either. How do you manage to look after it?
So it's I think it's like that dance again. I feel like what happens with like India and Canada is really great. That Canada, all the weddings happen in the summer season in May, March, May, June, July, August, max September it'll go on to. And then all the weddings in India happen in the winter. So they happen in like November, December, January, February. So it's like a perfect route to kind of do that, because it doesn't necessarily clash into each other. Like the seasons are very different. And it's when I actually started like the business part of like doing things officially and legally, and like in a way that like an entrepreneurial journey is set in Canada. And I believe like in India, I was doing more of freelancing work. But now that I'm doing that, like I'm shooting like weddings in India as well. But I'm shooting it from like under like this company in Canada. So it's actually quite nice because I have family there. So I like, if I get booked, then I get to travel back to India and like do my work, and then I come back here and I edit the photographs here and stuff like that. But overall, I think I believe my entrepreneurial journey started really here. I feel like Canada really made, like, there's a lot of resources and there's a lot of support and there's a lot of help around like new entrepreneurs, which I felt like I was kind of like I have no entrepreneurial family background, like zero. Like my father is a doctor, my mom is an art teacher. My brother is in medical, my sister is in finance. Like there's just like zero entrepreneur talk, and that has never been, and it's a risk to take, like I feel. And I also like didn't know that was something I would step into, but I think like I just knew that this is something I want to do, and I've always liked to like work in that way where I find fulfillment. And I think that kind of started the whole thing. And when I was in India, it was mostly like it was all over the place. Like when I was doing like my things, it was mostly like either freelance or I would get invited to a shoot and I would shoot, but it was nothing like officially kind of done. And Society started like in Canada, in Vancouver. And so, in fact, like this June, I'm traveling back to Vancouver again, and then I come back again to Toronto. So, um, it's and I know a lot of wedding photographers as well who travel all around the world, and like they're shooting. Like a lot of Indian photographers are shooting outside, like in Italy. Italy is like the destination spot. So I feel like the journey of wedding photographer is like a very like all over the world kind of.
It's funny because a friend of mine, I interviewed him for Canada's podcast. It's not live yet. About 3 weeks ago, who's also a photographer in Grimsby, just in Niagara region, and he's been in that area for he took over his dad's business basically for 30 odd years, and he's made his life, pretty successful photographer in that area, and I'm just sort of curious to know the difference between that, the high street photographer local, and your role, and the challenge, of obviously you're maybe attracting a different kind of profile than that. So I was interested in the challenge of that. What does that mean in terms of promotion, that kind of thing? I mean, he's running social locally and promoting himself locally. How do you get those? How do you get your customers? Basically, I'm just curious. Is it all referrals, or are you actively out there promoting, basically?
Does he shoot weddings actually? Like, I'm just curious. Does your friend photograph weddings?
Yes, he does. Yes.
Okay. Oh, okay. I see. Yeah, I think it's because
all kinds of weddings, family, kids. He does, he's got his own studio locally and stuff like that.
That's a very interesting point that you mentioned. I feel like because I'm an immigrant, and also I think, and also because internet has opened up borders almost like for all of us. I think these two factors definitely play a role in that, because for me, like home is such an interesting place, right? Like I'm not in India, but I know that is also home, and I'm here, and I know this is also home, and I think internet, and I also believe, like as an immigrant, like I don't see travel as like travel. Like I feel like, and for some reason, I do get stability in motion. Like every time I'm traveling from one place or the other, like I find some stability. Like I feel very stagnant if I'm in one place, and that's just me. But I think like, I think it's almost like because I've I traveled from, and India and Canada are not close, so it's always a long journey. And I think one of the reasons for me to move from Vancouver to Toronto is because it already reduces 5 hours to go to India every time if I have to go. Because between Toronto and Vancouver, there's such a big distance. So I think it's the internet, and it's also definitely. And I find that the Canada is such an interesting place because there are people from all around the world here. So in fact, like I had a client last year, and they're also like a mixed racial client. So basically, like the groom was Italian, and the bride was Indian. But like the bride's family had moved to Italy a long time ago, and now both of them have moved to Canada. So I feel like, actually, now that you're saying it, I'm realizing a lot of my clients are people who making those shifts in their lives. A lot of them are like moving, like for whatever reasons, for a better life, or a just that shift of future. But I think so, and they asked me to like shoot their wedding, which was in Italy. So it was just really interesting to like shoot an Indian Italian wedding in like Italy in a way, and I saw Italy in a very different way. Like it almost felt like I was half in India, half in Italy. Like the Italy part of Italy, like the groom side was like very Italian, and the bride side was very Indian, and they both live
That would
here.
have been interesting. So you started this. I mean, obviously you've been photography for a while, but you started this venture a couple of years ago.
2 years now.
And I'm interested to know, kind of, for others, the challenges that you've met. Money, clients. What are the top two challenges that you've either had to overcome, or you're still working on it? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I still feel like I'm building my network here. Like, if I can be honest, I feel like I keep moving so much that I'm always afloat. And every time, like how your friend has like a setup, and everyone knows that this is the person to go to in that like area, and like I'm sure like further beyond. But I feel like I've moved so much. Like I've associated myself from one place to the other. And by the time I start making a network, I'm like uprooted from there in another place. So I feel that's definitely been a challenge, in a good way and a bad way. Like I found a lot of different kinds of people, and I met a lot of different kinds of people. And I think in the longer run, it's going to be a very interesting journey. But I think that's definitely always a challenge of like moving from one place to the other. And even I think, as like a person who's come from a different country, who doesn't have a home to fall back onto or stuff like that, I think financial aspects of doing something on your own in a different place, in a completely different place, has been an interesting place for me to maneuver. Like when I started the company, I was doing like a few cafe jobs, and also like I was working at Vancouver Film School as a teacher assistant. So there were always things that I was juggling at the side as well to keep this going. And so I think that's always. And
So it started off as almost, to use the current terminology, a side hustle with other things. Have you stepped forward now into the next phase of it, where it's your focus, basically?
Yes.
Interesting.
And it's always definitely not been easy. I feel like an entrepreneurial journey, I don't know, especially I felt like, because like I come from a design background. I went to Vancouver Film School, so a lot of these school teachings are also always around like the artistic side of things, and not necessarily a very business oriented direction. So I feel like that was something I had to like really find and learn for myself. And that's something that me and my husband talk about a lot, that I hope that in the future we can support like artist entrepreneurs, and we can make like resources easy for them, and like have like, because in art schools it's all very like all over the place in terms of business. Like business is never a conversation. Artists don't like to talk about it. It's almost like in fact, I have this long Instagram post where I kind of was looking at that fact that I feel like as creative people who are sometimes, kind of a bit of a dreamers, they have visions, they want to do this, and they see light in a different way. Music impacts them and all of that. And in all of that, they kind of lose or don't focus on the part that's very, very important as a rational part for an entrepreneur to hold on to. And in fact, I think it's one of the most important things to learn. As much as you don't like to pick up a book that's going to talk about money, and you would rather pick up a nice fiction and you would fulfill that, I think it's super, super important to kind of find these resources and like sink into the world, because otherwise it can be a very challenging journey for sure.
Canada's podcast is your gateway to success in the world of entrepreneurship. Start listening today. CanadasPodcast.com. Subscribe now.
So thinking about that, and mentorship and things like that, What's the best piece of advice that you've received in this sort of journey so far?
I think consistency, like doing like one day's work at a time and not getting overwhelmed by the overarching vision that you have, and doing that one small bit that needs to be done and then moving on to the next day. I feel like consistency never came to me before. Like in my earlier um, part of the life, I was never necessarily consistent. I would do a lot of creative things, but I would do it for myself necessarily. And I feel like now I have started to. If you see my Google Calendar, it is. I'm actually very proud of it because it's the most organized calendar, at least for me, for the past like four since I started this company. Like I don't like my calendar is like one of the most set pieces that I could never have imagined I would have like that. So for me, I think.
So your family aren't entrepreneurs, and you've become one. What's what have you learned? What if if you know now, what you wish you knew when you were starting out on this entrepreneurial journey, just for the benefit of somebody else, maybe just beginning it as well.
Absolutely. I first is to all. I think like it's never too late to ask for help. Like it's always a good idea to find a mentor and basically ask for that help that you might require. And it might feel like, no, okay, I can do this and I can figure this out on my own and stuff like. I found that I've had some mentors through this. I don't know if you know about this organization called the Forum. It's a women entrepreneur support group almost. And I found some really good mentors from there, and the community has been such a strong place for me to build myself. And I think the first time I started, I just didn't know where to start. Like it was just a completely it was just like there was no ground beneath my feet.
Well, it's a bit like BNI, where you and I met. I mean,
absolutely.
I think these things are really these environments, networking places where you meet people, if not the same as you, in a similar kind of journey, on similar journeys. You can learn a lot.
Absolutely, like yourself. For me, right? Like for me, this is another like a relationship, and that's how you kind of. I think giving it time, like for sure. Like I think to give, like to know that, like if something is not working and it's kind of like going under a graph, you just like have to like basically have faith. I think have patience, because I feel entrepreneurial journeys are never like, oh, Monday to Friday 9 to 6. That's just definitely sometimes like Wednesdays I'm like getting no inspiration, no will to work, so I take it off as my Saturday, and then I have to show up on Saturday to work. And that's, I think, some sort of discipline for sure. And yeah, the willingness and consistency, something to hold you accountable for as well.
Good little conversation. That's fairly serious stuff we've been talking about. Let's have some fun rapid fire things. If you weren't doing what you're doing for work now, what do you think you'd be doing instead?
I would love to be an actor, dancer, like more like theater.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe a gardener also. I have way too many. I think I have way too many. Fun, if you want to talk about fun, I feel like I'm always there. So this is something I have to pull myself into. Yeah.
What book are you currently reading, listening to, and would recommend that people read?
So I'm reading this. I'm actually reading a few, but the one that stands out to me right now, it's called Daring Greatly. And it's by this author called Brené Brown. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, but it talks about vulnerability and the courage around it, and like what we're talking about before, to like ask for support and stuff like. But I'm honestly like not even halfway into it, so I don't want to like necessarily make conclusions. But I think it's a really, really, really great book for people like to know where the courage lies, because sometimes in like this aspect of perfectionism, we might like get disconnected from really that. And there's some really good dialogue in that book. Mm-hmm.
Are you a morning or a night person?
For the past, I would say almost like 7 years, a super morning person. But before that, a full like night owl.
And if you had to pick one word to describe yourself, what would it be, and why would you choose that word?
Mm-hmm. I think I'm very one word. That's such an interesting question.
Well, one word could be a phrase. I mean, let's not be too strict about it.
I think I'm always changing. Like I feel like I've started to not see myself as one thing, and I'm always open to like change. And because I feel like I'm starting to like really, there's a long story around, but I won't go in it. But yeah, always willing to change and adapt.
And what's keeping you up at night?
Honestly, this Photo Poet Society. To me, it's like now that it's becoming something of its own, and it's not necessarily me as well. I feel like it's something, it's like a baby who's growing up, and you have to kind of work on it. It excites you. So yeah, for me, this company is a vision which is a little bit bigger than just doing like photography or something. It's definitely more about ideas and concepts that I would love to incorporate.
And I think we're just coming to the end of the run here. So how can people get a hold of you if they listen to this and they like what they're hearing and they want to talk to you? How can they get a hold of you?
Absolutely. So anyone, please feel free to email me at nadia@photopoetsociety.com. It's spelled as PHOTOPOETSOCIETY.com. And Nadia is spelled as NADIYA, because I know there's always a Y missing in some names. But honestly, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can also find me on Instagram as Photo Poet Society, and feel free to DM. I would love to like support anyone in their entrepreneurial journeys.
Nadia, thanks very much. Great little conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks. Thank you, Philip. Thanks for having me.